2024 was easily the best year on this channel so far. Last year, I got to drive more than 20 new electric cars, including facelifted and updated versions of current models. I got to go to a lot of premieres and a lot of launches around the world. It was just a great year with a lot of great experiences. And in the last video, I talked about the 5 worst cars I drove last year. And out of all the new cars I drove, none of them were necessarily terrible, but the last video are the bottom 5 electric cars I drove last year. So if you want to check that out, that's the last video. I will link it down below. But this video is all about positivity. It's all about talking about the 5 best and most amazing and awesome electric cars I drove in 2024. And before we kick off this list, I have to say it was really hard ranking these cars 1 through 5 because I think all of them are awesome in their own respect, and all of these are actually quite different. And the price point from the cheapest one up till the most expensive one is like 4 or 5 times as much. So, you can't necessarily compare these in between each other, but I just thought these were the most, surprisingly good electric cars and just the most awesome experiences and good experiences of new electric cars or facelifted versions I had of 2024. Coming in 5th place is the Peugeot E5008, a quite big 7-seat electric SUV. And I've always been a fan of Peugeot, even though I haven't talked about it a lot here on the channel. My first new car that I bought in 2008 was actually a Peugeot 207 1.6 HDI, and I love that car to death. So this was quite a curious event because I flew from Oslo to Copenhagen, where we picked up the cars to drive to Sweden, to Aarhus on the southeast coast. And that's weird, flying to Copenhagen from Oslo to go to Sweden, because Sweden is just like 1.5 hours away from Oslo, like the border of Sweden. Not the same place in Sweden, but that's just very curious. Flying to Denmark to drive to Sweden. But this was a surprisingly good car. I think it is very good looking, and also a 7-seat electric SUV for this price point. For the price of a Tesla Model Y, no, you're not going to get the same performance and stuff like that, but it is a big car which looks great on the exterior and also has a really high quality interior. I was really impressed by the interior because I went down to this launch in June, and I think the month prior, like the end of May, I went to Spain to drive the new Audi Q6 e-tron, which has a nice interior but a little bit disappointing for the price point. And I thought this interior was just as good as that interior in that Audi for a lot cheaper price point. And also, for being this type of vehicle, no, it's not exciting, it's not fast, but it just drove very well. Sharp and quick steering, it just felt light on its feet with great comfort, and yeah, just a very good car for this price point. And I can't wait to test it again on Norwegian roads because I think I'm gonna like it even more when I get to test it here. Coming in 4th place is an electric car I've driven a lot in 2024. The first time I got to drive it was early in the year in Jokkmokk in northern Sweden on an ice track, and that is of course the Polestar 3. I went to the launch in May or in June, I don't remember exactly when, I think it was like an end of May in Spain, and then I've driven a lot of press cars in Norway at the end of the year, and actually today I just delivered back a long-range dual-motor performance I've had over Christmas for like almost 3 weeks. So this is a car I've driven a lot. This is a car I've made a lot of videos on and compared it to a lot of cars. I've compared it to my own private vehicle, the Porsche Taycan Cross Turismo. I've compared it to the Audi Q6 e-tron and the Porsche Macan. So there are a whole bunch of videos here on the channel if you want a deep dive into this car. And despite this car having a lot of software issues, I still think it is an achievement from Polestar to make an electric car this good. Yes, it is expensive, but if you compare it to an equivalently equipped Audi Q6 e-tron, it's about the same price, and you're getting a lot of car for that price point. If you compare it to a Porsche Macan, it's actually a little bit cheaper. And if you're looking at any of these cars, I would highly recommend you guys to go out and test drive it, because the driving dynamics are amazing, the interior is amazing, the comfort is amazing, the sound system is amazing, and the car looks awesome. Coming in third place is the Porsche Macan, and this is a car I've also tested a lot in 2024. I got to go to Stuttgart in October to test drive the rear-wheel drive version and also the 4S. I drove it on the Autobahn. I've also driven the 4 here in Norway and the Turbo. So I've driven all of the different variants. This is also a car I ordered back in February or March for myself, but once the videos came out, I'm like, oh no, I don't think this is the right car for me because it's kind of a downgrade compared to a Taycan, and I didn't want to spend more money on a car that, you know, arguably has not as good of an interior and isn't as good to drive. But still, compared to the Audi Q6 e-tron, the Polestar 3, which I did a comparison video with, and the other competition, I think this is the best car in this price segment if you don't option it out too hefty. Yes, you can, you know, get a crazy spec turbo like the one I had on loan before Christmas, which is like almost 1.8 million kroners, which is an insane price. But you can also get a very nice equipped 4 for just more than 1 million kroners, or less than $100,000, or 100,000 or 90,000 pounds. I made a video about how to spec your Macan. I'll link that down below if you want a deep dive into, you know, what options to get and not to get. But I think it's one of the best electric cars of 2024 because it's a Porsche that is practical. It's almost as good to drive as a Taycan, but it's a lot more roomy, and also it's cheaper. Yeah, it's a win-win. The second best car I drove in 2024 was a car I drove once for one day, but I drove it for an insane event called the Taycan 1111 kilometer challenge, which was just an insane day. Me and another driver, a Norwegian racing driver who drives a 911 Porsche Cup car called Isabel Rustad, we drove that against other countries, trying to cover that distance the fastest, going, you know, passing through 3 Porsche charging lounges. The car I drove was a Porsche Taycan Cross Turismo Turbo S, the new facelifted version with all the bells and whistles and the active suspension. And yes, this is by far the most expensive car I drove last year. I think it's like more than $200,000 or 200,000 euros, 2.5 million kroners, like an insanely priced car. But also, it's the fastest car I've ever driven. I think 0 to 100 kilometers an hour in like 2.5 seconds, top speed 250 kilometers an hour, and 952 horsepower. This car was just a rocket ship on the Autobahn, and being able to drive it like more than 1100 kilometers just flat out for a whole day, yeah, that was an insane experience, you know, pushing that car to the limit. I've also driven other facelifted Taycans, the Cross Turismo and the 4S, and, you know, I have a Taycan Cross Turismo that I've had now for almost 3 years, so I have a lot of experience with the Taycan. And this Taycan, the new one, is just better in every way, and it's still one of the cars that is so close to my heart because, yes, it's expensive, and you can't compare it to most of the other cars here on the list, if any. But if we're looking at like the best cars, this is the second best car I drove last year, even considering that insane price point. And coming in first place is a car I made a video about, which was called Please Buy This, and that was the Volkswagen ID.7 Tourer GTX, the station wagon, the real first proper large station wagon, which is electric from, you know, a major manufacturer. And a lot of people were complaining like this car is expensive, and in some markets it may be more expensive than in other markets, but I think here in Norway, the car I drove, which was fully spec'd, was a little more than 600,000 kroners. I think it was like 610,000 kroners. And that is pretty much the price of a long-range dual-motor Tesla Model Y. And this car has a bigger battery. It's not going to be as fast, but the interior is bigger. The quality is better. It looks a lot better. And also, it's so much more comfortable and quiet and practical, being a large station wagon. And for me, this is a no-brainer. I think a lot of people buy the Tesla Model Y because it's the obvious choice. You know, it's a kind of big electric SUV, and also Tesla, I mean, people know what Tesla are. And hopefully the ID.7 Tourer, the GTX version, isn't too late to the party. But if it was my money, there's no doubt in my mind what I would spend this amount of money on. I would not buy the Tesla. The Tesla is a fine vehicle for a lot of people, but it has a harsh ride, a boring interior, and it's just, yeah, it's just a very boring car that's noisy and not comfortable on the motorway. This is just a better car in almost every way, in my opinion. Better infotainment system. I mean, come on. Tesla has a good infotainment system, but this has an even better infotainment system, the ID.7 Volkswagen. So yeah, for that price point, it's a no-brainer. Even in Germany, I think, and in Switzerland, people were commenting like they've reduced the price. It's about the same price as a Model Y from Tesla. And also, you can go into a Volkswagen dealer anywhere in the world and you can haggle. You can get the price down even though the list price is higher. So even if it's more expensive, like 2 or 3 or 5,000 euros, I think it's well worth spending the money on an ID.7 Tour GTX over the Tesla Model Y long range. So guys, those are the best cars I drove in 2024. And again, the order is kind of hard, and of course some of the cars are a lot more expensive than the other cars. Like for example, that Taycan Turismo Turbo S is like 4 or 5 times more expensive than, you know, the entry-level version of the Peugeot E5008. So an insane difference in pricing. So guys, let me know what were the best cars you drove in 2024. So I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please drop me a thumbs up down below. And for more car content, as always, please subscribe. See you guys later and goodbye.